I'm not raising my hand. Anybody in the room? Yeah, you're not going to try it a second time, are you? But here's the deal. If Jesus is actually who Jesus says he is, they're not in control. And when any of us, listen, this is a universal truth, when any of us feel threatened by the truth, we respond with mockery. It's what we do. Think about it. When you're faced with truth or with a reality that you don't want to embrace, how do you respond? Do you make a joke? Do you diminish it, reduce it down to something that we can maintain and we can control? We just ignore it? This is how humanity operates. And I think these 3 short verses reveal what is true, I think most of the time, that rejection is usually behind the ridicule. So we ridicule something, we mock something, we make fun of something. I mean, I've heard it, right? We get into grow groups, we talk about the Bible, we talk about Jesus, and we get to a point where something makes us feel a little bit discomfort, and we feel uncomfortable, and so what do? We make a joke. Instead of embracing, we make a joke. Mockery has always been a defense tool against truth. It just has. You know why? Because mockery is easier than surrender. It's easier to laugh at Jesus, make fun of Jesus, than it is to bow down to him and declare him the king of your life. Always. And so we turn to Jesus, and we turn Jesus into a meme, we turn him into a moral teacher, we turn him into some fancy cultural symbol while avoiding making him king. And the problem is that we don't mock something we don't believe in or that we have dismissed. We don't. We only mock something that unsettles us. We only turn something into a joke when we feel uncomfortable. We reduce Jesus down to something that we can manage, and mockery reveals a heart that's actually resisting authority. It's actually resisting surrender. This is important because it happens with Christians, but I'm sure you have people in your life who are like, oh, you're going to church to do your Jesus thing. You have to understand. They're not being jerks. They're unsettled by the reality of who Jesus is. And it's a lot easier to make fun than it is to submit. And so our approach with those folks then, this was free, all right? This wasn't even in my notes. The approach then is grace and mercy, not defense and being argumentative. Does that make sense? No, that's okay. So mockery isn't enough. Jesus doesn't go away. And so we shift from these soldiers to something else. Look at this, chapter 22, verse 66. When day came, the assembly of the elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council, and they said, "If you are the Christ, tell us." But Jesus said to them, "If I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask you, you will not answer, but from now on the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God." That statement didn't go very well. So they all said, "Are you the Son of God then?" And he said to them, "You say that I am." And so they said, "Well, what further testimony do we need? We've heard it for ourselves from his own lips." And so Jesus is taken before the council of elders. This group of people, they're the religious elite people. They're the experts. They are the very people who should have been able to see the signs of the Messiah and trust that he was actually coming. They should have seen Jesus better than anybody else did. But they asked Jesus the question, "Are you the Son of God?" And Jesus answers in a way that makes truth unavoidable. And they respond by saying, "We don't need to hear anything else. We're done hearing. We've heard enough." Here's what I need you to know about this religious council. They are not confused. They have all the information they need. They do not lack any evidence whatsoever. But they've all reached a breaking point, and instead of surrendering to the truth, they reject the truth. So are you ready for the second truth we can't ignore? You're not sure after the first one, I know. Here it is. The greatest barrier of faith is not a lack of evidence. It's a resistance to the implications. And if you think this just pertains to people who don't follow Jesus, you're wrong. If Jesus is the Son of God, then he has authority over them. He has authority over us. It means they must surrender and they must submit to him. And if that's the situation, this will change everything. It'll change their lives, it'll change their religion, it'll change their families, it'll change how they work and live. Everything changes, so they reject Jesus because of the implications, not because of the truth. They don't want that. And trust me, there's some of us sitting here today, we love Jesus. We want to be close enough to Jesus. We like what Jesus stands for. But we kind of keep an arm's length distance from Jesus. I don't want to get too close, because if I get too close, I know what he's going to change in me. And the truth is, I don't want to. The truth is, we'll stay close enough to Jesus, and we'll blame it on some evidence of faith. When it has nothing to do with evidence, it has to do with the changes that Jesus will make in our lives, and we actually don't want to make any changes. So today, it's not about people not hearing about Jesus. People hear about Jesus all the time. People have heard about Jesus. It's actually that they understand enough about Jesus to know that following him is actually going to cost something. And so instead, we reject him, we don't answer, and many of us are in that category today. We like Jesus, we know about Jesus, we want to be like Jesus and around Jesus, we want to be close enough to Jesus, but we have not surrendered our lives and declared Jesus King because we know what it will require of us. So we have the soldiers, we have the religious elite, but now we have the government. How do you think that's going to work out for Jesus? So look at this, chapter 23, verse 1. Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, and they said, "We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king." Oh, they knew exactly what to say to the Roman leaders and the Roman government. Hey, we can't serve Caesar. You have to remember, they've not wanted to serve Caesar all along. They want Caesar dead and gone. But now all of a sudden they're using that. As Pilate asked him, "Are you king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "You have said so." And so then Pilate said to the chief priests and to the crowd, "I find no guilt in this man." In other words, he's innocent. I don't think he's guilty of what you're saying. He should be set free. He should be let go. There's nothing, he's committed no crimes. But they were urgent, saying he stirs up people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee even to this place. And Galilee to Pilate was like, ding, 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 like this is good. Verse 6, when Pilate heard this, he asked whether this man was Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod. He's like, great, I don't have to deal with this problem. I'm going to send him over to Herod and let Herod deal with this problem, and Herod, who happened to be in Jerusalem at the time. So when Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. Herod loved entertainment. Here's Jesus. I've heard about Jesus. I know about Jesus. I heard he can do really cool things like turn water to wine. Maybe he can do that trick for me today. I heard he can raise people from the dead and he can heal disease. Maybe what he can do for me is a couple of those little things. And so he questioned him at some length, but Jesus said nothing. And the chief priests and the scribes stood up, vehemently accusing him, and Herod with his soldiers treated him with contempt and mocked him. We just explained mocking. Then arraying him in splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. So I'm going to dress you up like a king. I'm going to make you look like a king. We're going to make fun of you. And Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that day, for before this they had been enemies with each other. So Jesus is taken to Pilate. Pilate examines him and declares that he finds no guilt in him whatsoever. And you would think that that would be the end of it. Unfortunately, it was not, because truth does not usually guarantee courage. Did you hear me? Truth does not usually guarantee courage. So Pilate is worried about a riot. He's already on thin ice with Caesar. He's in a lot of trouble, and so he certainly doesn't want any trouble on his watch. And so he sends Jesus to Herod. Herod's curious, but Herod is not. We avoid certain topics as if it was COVID-19. Because I don't want to be blatant and have to reject it. So let's just avoid it. Let's just not talk about it. When Jesus calls me to surrender all, that's a cute song and all, but let's just avoid the topic, because I'm really not wanting to be that obnoxious and reject that I'm not going to do it. Believers do this all the time. Instead of actually rejecting it, we just avoid it. But avoidance is still a decision. And Pilate tries to stay neutral. Herod wants entertainment, but neither Pilate or Herod can escape the question. And we can't escape the question either. What will you do with Jesus? And so, the moment reaches its peak. The soldiers have been confronted. The religious elite have been confronted. The politicians have been confronted. And now we're going to reach the climax with the crowd. And if we haven't decided what we're going to do with Jesus yet, this is a breaking point, and it's absolutely unavoidable. This is what verse 13 says. Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, and he said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him." So neither did Herod. He sent him back to us. So look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. And so I will punish him, and then I will release him. And so Pilate seems to take a stand here, and he says, listen, I've looked, I've examined, I've made judgment. He's innocent. He should be punished a little bit for his obnoxiousness, and then I will release him. But look what happens, verse 18. But they all cried out together, "Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas." And so Luke tells us who Barabbas is, a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city and for murder. And so Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, "Crucify, crucify him." And a third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him." But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified. And their voices prevailed, so Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. And so Pilate released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. You have the soldiers, the religious elite, the government, and now the crowd. And Pilate gathers the people, and he declares again, "I have found this man innocent." 3 different times Pilate declares that Jesus has no guilt in him. And yet the crowd shouts and the crowd cries out, "Crucify, crucify him." And then the most shocking and most surprising exchange takes place. Barabbas, a man absolutely guilty of insurrection, a man absolutely guilty, proven guilty of murder, is offered alongside Jesus, and one of them will be free. And the people declare that Barabbas, the guilty man, should be free. So are you ready for the truth we can't ignore? This moment is humanity exposed. Because given the choice between innocence and guilt, given the choice between righteousness and rebellion, given the choice between Jesus and Barabbas, they choose rebellion. Do you know why? Because Barabbas represents something in all of us, and it's freedom without submission. We like this. We want to be close enough to Jesus to know we're free. We'll be involved enough with Jesus for freedom. We like our freedom. We'll do anything to protect our freedom, even declare that we are Jesus followers. But we absolutely like freedom without submission. Maybe a better way to say it is we like our free control, our self-control, more than we like submission. And so Jesus represents a king we must obey. And for the crowd, they would rather have a guilty man who lets them live exactly the way they want to live than a righteous king who calls them to be transformed. And this is not just their story. This is our story. Every single time we choose sin over obedience, where we choose self over surrender, where we choose control over Jesus, we choose freedom without submission. And what bothers me the most about these verses is the revelation that the crowd chooses what it truly loves. Do not misunderstand me. You and I reveal what we truly love by the decisions we make every single day. And loving ourselves and loving our control and loving sin is revealed in our choices every day. Do not misunderstand me, because this is truth. Eventually, what's in our hearts is made public. It just is. You can't escape it. You can hide for a really long time. We can hide for a long, long time. But eventually what's here actually becomes public and is exposed. I've sat with people and I've had conversations, a variety of different conversations. And I'm like, I've got this phrase. I say, uh-oh, I don't think you meant to say that to me. And these people look at me like, what do you mean? I said, I think you just revealed what you love most. Usually the conversation doesn't last much longer, but it's fun anyway. I know if you sit with me long enough, you'll find what I really love. Eventually, what's here has to be made public. So I'm going to ask you again the question that we're asking today. What will you do with Jesus? And I want to caution you, because if you're like, man, I've been following Jesus for 40 years, I'm good to go. Let's talk about freedom without submission. Maybe you're in the early stages. You're kind of like the soldiers. You're just there and you're kind of dancing with this faith thing. You're kind of dancing with Jesus a little bit, but you don't really want to be all in. And so you kind of make fun of some of the stuff that we do, and you kind of tease about some of the stuff, and I know, get your holy, whatever. And man, I love that you're there, because that means you're a lot closer than you realize. What are you going to do with Jesus? Because what we see in these 6 trials is the soldiers mocked him. The religious elite, they rejected him. Pilate avoids him. Herod just wants to trivialize him. And then the crowd replaces him. And all have different responses, and yet they all have one common reality. And the common reality is this, that no one can ignore him. No one can stay neutral forever about Jesus. Everyone faces this inevitable decision because it's a breaking point. And although the world aligns itself against Jesus, enemies become friends with those who reject him, and the guilty are freed while the innocent are condemned. And the truth is, I'm in chapter 23, and you're in chapter 23, and we don't get to be spectators, we are participants. And at some point, every single one of us, we face this breaking point, and we have to decide what we're going to do with Jesus. And I warned you for 4 weeks that it was going to get harder along the way, and so let me ask you, will you mock him? Will you dismiss him? Will you avoid him or reject him? Or like the crowds, will you just replace him? Or will you recognize him for who he is and actually surrender to him as the actual king? Because at the breaking point, everyone decides. Everyone has to wrestle with it. And everyone has to ask, what will I do with Jesus? And so I don't know where you're at. But we're going to provide some time and some space this morning for you to wrestle with that question, because here's the deeper truth of the passage. Here's the deeper truth of Luke chapter 23. The innocent one, Jesus, was condemned so the guilty could go free. That's it. Barabbas walks away alive, and Jesus takes his place. Boil that down. I walk away alive because Jesus took my place. Further, you get to walk away alive. You get to experience freedom. You are set free because Jesus took your place. I think that's everything Luke's trying to tell us. It's what makes our communion time, I think, so special. It's what makes the table so valuable. We don't come to the table as perfect people. I don't eat the bread and drink the juice because I've figured it all out, because I've perfected the Christian life, because I've got everything put together and perfect. We come to the table because we see ourselves in the story as people who are in the crowd, people in silence. We get to be these people, people in compromise, and yet Jesus, in the midst of all of it, he still goes to the cross. He sat at a table with Judas, who would do the ultimate betrayal, with Peter, who would deny him. And every single week we gather around the table, just like Peter and just like Judas, knowing that Jesus was still going to die for us. Communion is the place where we get to remember that his body was broken, not mine. That his blood was poured out, not mine. Why? So we could experience the ultimate life and ultimate freedom. And yet, some of us are still cautiously just kind of watching from a distance. Eat the bread, drink the juice today, remembering that you get to walk away with life when you actually deserve death. There's a table back here, one over here, one up in the balcony, one over here. Piece of bread in the bottom cup, cup of juice in the top. Take some time and think about these things. You're free to go.